But let's change hats and go back to our outline here and say that the third reason that shows that it's probable that God exists and also allows evil to exist is the full scope of the evidence.
Exactly. When the atheist says that it's improbable that God exists, we immediately need to ask ourselves, improbable relative to what? You see, probabilities are always relative to background information. For example, let's suppose that Sven is a young Swedish fellow and that it's 90% probable that young Swedish fellows ski. Well, relative to that background information, that makes it highly probable that Sven is a skier. But now, suppose that we acquire the additional background information that Sven is a double amputee, and that 95% of Swedish double amputees do not ski. Well, now suddenly, relative to this new background information, it's highly improbable that Sven is a skier. So when someone says it's improbable that God exists, you need to immediately ask, improbable with respect to what? With respect to the evil and suffering in the world? Well, if that's all you consider for your background information, it's no wonder God's existence would look improbable relative to that alone. But that's not the really interesting question, is it? The interesting question is, relative to the full scope of the background information, is God's existence probable? And I'm persuaded that when you consider the full scope of the information relative to God's existence, then God's existence turns out to be quite probable, even given any improbability that evil and suffering might be thought to throw upon his existence.
There are several bits of information that you say support what you've just said. Tell us about that.
In my debates and articles, I've defended a number of arguments for God's existence. For example, I think that God is the best explanation of why the universe exists rather than nothing. I think God is the best explanation of the origin of the universe at a point in the finite past. I think God is the best explanation of the fine-tuning of the universe for intelligent, interactive life. I think God is the best explanation for the existence of objective moral values and duties in the world. And I would argue that God is the best explanation for the historical facts concerning the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. So that when you consider the full scope of the background information, I think these arguments make it very probable that God exists, even given any improbability that evil and suffering might be thought to throw upon the existence of God. Those who propound the problem of evil typically assume there's nothing on the other side of the scale. But in fact, I think there is preponderant evidence for the existence of God on the other side of the scale that simply outweighs any improbability that results from evil and suffering.